The Chicago Bears have their new president and CEO with Big Ten Commissioner Kevin Warren. We might not notice big changes available to us on the outside, but it sure sounds like the Bears got the right man to replace Ted Phillips.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lorin Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Bears. You can like Locked On Bears on Facebook. Join the Locked On Bears Facebook group for even more Bears talk. And make sure you hit that subscribe button on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. I realize we haven't been as daily the last week. I was overseas on a nice little vacation to wrap up the football season here, but we are back and ready to roll into the offseason here and should be here for the foreseeable future here. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. On the show today, we will hear from new Chicago Bears president and CEO Kevin Warren. We'll get his thoughts on how he's going to run this organization, how that works in terms of the football operations side, the actual on-field stuff that matters the most to us watching this team on Sundays. We'll also hear about why he took this opportunity and left the Big Ten and how he sees the Bears as a good challenge for him. And I'm really interested to dig into how he navigates this idea of talking about the Bears as a challenge that he's looking forward to conquering without just crapping on the Bears and making it seem like this team was desperate and a disaster that he needs to come fix. And we'll wrap up with as much info as we can about the stadium processing plan and Arlington Heights and why it sure seems like it's going to be a slow rather than fast process that's still a long way in the future. But let's start with the stuff that seems to matter the most, right? What's going to happen when it comes to on-the-field operations? Because for a long time, the general manager, the head coach reports to the GM, and the GM was reporting to Ted Phillips as the president and CEO. Last year, when they hired Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus, they switched that to reporting to George McCaskey, and now McCaskey says they will then switch again back to them reporting to Kevin Warren as, again, sort of the head of the entire organization there, overseeing both the football side and the business side. Like Ted Phillips, Kevin's job will be primarily on the business side, that Ryan Poles is in charge of football decision making, and that is essentially he's running the football operations, but he still does report to Kevin Warren. And so it raises some questions about, okay, then who really has the final say? If Poles is in charge of football, but Kevin's his boss, can Kevin override him on football decisions as he sees fit? It was one of the questions that they asked of Warren at his introductory press conference. And he didn't exactly give a concrete answer to that question, but he did talk a little bit about how that structure and communication will go.
You've talked about kind of the football operations aspect of this. What will your responsibility be in like a day-to-day football operations, whether it's, the draft, free agency? Will it be, will you have authority with roster decisions? I know that Ryan will be reporting to you, but what will you be doing from a football operations standpoint?
Courtney, that's a great question. One of the things I've learned is when you build a championship culture, the questions and the ideal and the thought process of who has the final say and all that really becomes irrelevant, because at the end of the day, when we come out of whatever room we're in, we have the common goal. And the common goal is to bring championships here. And so I think my goal, I know every day, whether it's football, whether it's business, whether it's stadium, whether it's league matters, whether it's dealing with ownership, is to make sure that we're prepared, we're organized, we're detailed, we're methodical, and I'm there as a resource. And as I say, honestly, I always look up, because I'm a very boring person. This is all that I do. I don't have any hobbies. My wife's been telling me for years, you need to get hobbies. She finally stopped telling me that a couple years ago. She recognizes it's my family and it's my work. And this is not even work to me anymore. This is a unique situation. And so because of that, I'm able to come with no ego to be able to say, who do I know? Who do I know about someone? What can I bring to help the football operations to bring us a championship? Coach Dick Vermeil said something to me during our quest in St. Louis for a Super Bowl. Our first year, we were 5-11. Second year, we were 4-12. Last year, 16-3, our Super Bowl year. Two things he said. He said a lot of things, but really resonate with me. The second year, he said to me, he said, once people in the building realize that not if, but when we win the Super Bowl, that all of our rings are going to look the same, that they'll put their egos to the side. And it was interesting at the ring ceremony. It was right. My Super Bowl ring looked just like Kurt Warner's. It looks like just like Marshall Faulk's, Orlando Pace, and Torrey Holt, Isaac Bruce. It looked the same. And so that's one thing. The other thing that he said is you got to recognize that when you build a house, you build the basement first. So although you drive by a house and you don't see any progress upon land, that doesn't mean the building is not going on. And so I think with that and that common goal that Matt and Ryan and George and everyone in this organization will have, it will be a very healthy environment. We won't agree on everything, but we'll work together because we have a common goal of making sure that we bring championships to this franchise.
So he didn't directly say Ryan Poles has the final say or he has the final say, and I do understand that, right? I mean, the fear there is that he would meddle in football decisions and micromanage Ryan Poles in that way. That's why the question was asked, right? How much will you be involved in that and who would have the final say? But I imagine from Kevin's perspective, right? He as the boss would like to sort of maintain that final say power and say, yes, I have the ability to hire and fire the general manager. And so technically I do have the ability to veto and override and make, the important decisions that I feel like are super, super necessary. But he also doesn't want to give off the impression that he's going to be exerting that final say. But he also just doesn't want to just give it up and say, no, Ryan Poles has complete and total final say, and I'm just at the whim of what he does, because ultimately, if the football performance on the field isn't good enough, that will ultimately end up reflecting on Kevin Warren, the same way that many Bears fans have seen that reflect on Ted Phillips over the years, and why there was so much celebration of Phillips's retirement announcement. I do think one of the themes from Kevin Warren in this press conference was how much he talks about championships and that really being the goal. And that to me felt like the most refreshing and powerful part of the press conference, is that it's not just, hey, we're going to beat the Packers as the goal, because that bar should be down here, or we're going to win the NFC North. That bar it's important, but that shouldn't be the goal, because if you reach that goal, then you're not even at the top yet. The Super Bowl should be the goal and should be the organization's mindset. It should be about championships, not just division wins or wins over the rival. So I did like the way that Kevin Warren emphasized that. I still think of him as a very interesting hire for the Bears, given his experience with other NFL teams, even in the division, and coming over as Big Ten commissioner. We'll talk a little bit more about this opportunity for him and what he brings to this role next on Locked On Bears. The Locked On Bears podcast is brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn Jobs. As a small business owner or hiring manager, you know that success in 2023 all depends on the team members you surround yourself with. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. With LinkedIn Jobs, you can hire qualified candidates more efficiently by matching open roles with people who have the skills, values, and experience to help you achieve your goals. LinkedIn Jobs helps you quickly attract qualified candidates to your open jobs with their targeting tools. They go beyond resume data by using insights from your job post, company, and their 875 million member profiles to put your post in front of the most qualified candidates. LinkedIn Jobs makes it easy to then screen and rate applicants based on your job qualifications, all on one platform. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus the leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. The Chicago Bears didn't necessarily post the president and CEO job, but George McCaskey said they hired a firm that helped them identify candidates, and they identified candidates of their own. both of those lists included Kevin Warren as a pretty much a top target there. And they really seem to feel like they landed the big fish with this one, because clearly he brings a lot of really valuable experience. He was a longtime executive with the Minnesota Vikings, helped the Wilf family secure the ownership purchase of the Minnesota Vikings, helped them build US Bank Stadium as a brand new stadium in, what was that, the late 2010s, around there, and, really oversaw what was a fairly smooth process in that regard. Because, 2016 would have been when they started the first season in US Bank Stadium and got them a Super Bowl. So good timing with him joining the Bears this way. He was also in the Lions front office. He was with the Rams front office and won a Super Bowl with them. And he's also worked as a player agent and attorney before that. So he's really been around the NFL and around a lot of different sides of the football operations business. And I think it helps having a guy who's been in football in this role, comparatively to Ted Phillips, who's always just been a very successful business executive, but not a football, other than working for the Bears, right? Not directly involved in other aspects of football operations, like ownership, like player management, like player operations, and other roles that a guy like Warren has had in the NFL with other organizations and has seen how things are done as an outsider here to bring new perspective, as opposed to Ted, who was kind of promoted from within and had done a lot of great things on the business side, but didn't have that football background and the football experience to offer in his decision-making above the general manager and head coach. So it kind of raises some questions of like, okay, Kevin Warren is the Big Ten commissioner. It's a pretty prestigious opportunity. They haven't had a lot of Big Ten commissioners over the years. You're leading a huge conference in college football. It's expanding. The playoffs are expanding. New media rights deal. There was the coronavirus stuff, which was difficult for him, but it was difficult for everybody. I mean, no one had the game plan for how to get through the peak of the early days of the pandemic, but this was not a guy who was desperate to get out of his job. Seemed to be, doing things well there and happy with where he was. But for him, I think, first of all, living in Chicago and being in the area was attractive for him. But he also sees, I think, a greater opportunity here with the Chicago Bears than he was getting with the Big Ten to really be involved in an organization. Here's how Kevin kind of described the opportunity in his eyes.
Given where you were, what was most attractive to you about this job when it came on your radar? And also, what can you bring in the short term to energize this organization?
I think the thing that was most attractive, Dan, was the fact of the challenge. I'm a big believer in challenges, and I wouldn't want it if it were easy. If all the elements were in place, it wouldn't have been as attractive. But the main thing is the challenge. And I believe in every organization, there are certain inflection points. And I think the Chicago Bears are at that point from a positive standpoint. We have so many positive things. I never look at the negatives. There's no such thing as a negative situation. It's just opportunities. And I think when you starts with the ownership, when you have the McCaskey family, the way they operate their lives and the way they operate in the respected nature, and to tie this back to be one of the founding franchises, that's what you start with. And then you think about the fans and the alumni and the players and the coaches and the creative scouting department, what Coach and Ryan bring to the table, and the success that they've had, and a young team and draft picks and free agency and all of those different things. So that's what intrigues me. I always want to have something where when you get out of the bed in the morning that you say there is too much to do, because what that I've learned in my life, that's when I know I'm in my sweet spot, and that's when I know to really have to rely on my relationship with God and prayer and faith, and to work hard and come together. And so if things had been in place here totally, I wouldn't have been as attractive. But when you put ownership that has their integrity and the foundation that they've set with all the other elements in place, there is no greater opportunity in the world right now in sports. And so to have that here in Chicago with this incredible fan base and this history and tradition, it is truly rare and unique.
I really like the way Kevin tiptoes that line in that answer. You don't really hear it in his voice exactly. You don't hear it exactly in his word choice, but just conceptually, when you think about what he's actually saying there, right? He sees the Bears as a great challenge for him, and that he can come in here and take a historic, proud organization that's got great ownership and stuff and lead them to championships. But when you think, when you take that a layer deeper, if the Bears are a challenge that he has to come in and sort of, fix and elevate, that suggests that things were not going well. And I mean, they weren't, right? I mean, this team hasn't won a championship since '85 and the Super Bowl in 2006, but this team has not been good enough for quite some time. It's not to say that it's not a challenge, but it's just interesting that you try and toe this line of they were very complimentary of Ted Phillips, and the work he's done, but also, hey, this team needs to be better and needs to improve, and that we can come in here and make them better, right? He's trying to balance this of not completely tearing down everything that's happened before him, and sort of pointing out that things weren't good enough under Ted Phillips, and that they need to be better, and that it's kind of a reflection on Ted Phillips that he was the president and CEO over these 20 plus years, and outside of a stretch with Lovie Smith there really wasn't much success to write home about. And Warren's kind of trying to balance, how do I say this nicely, that this team, that I want to return them to the glory that they haven't been in a long time. This team's been bad and not good enough, and I want to be the guy who fixes that without it making it seem like Ted Phillips was bad and did a bad job and needed to be replaced. And he's retiring, he wasn't fired, right? That's an important part of this process. But I really appreciated how Kevin tried to navigate that sort of process there, because it wasn't immediately obvious in the words that he chose. But when you really think about, what makes the Bears a challenge then? Well, it kind of reflects poorly on the job Ted Phillips has done and the organization has done, despite all of the complimentary things he said about the ownership and the history and the organization and stuff. It's also there is a real need for someone to elevate this to another level and for this team to do even better than they have been doing up to this point. And again, having a football guy, more of a football guy, a guy with more of a football background in that president and CEO role feels like something that can be very beneficial for the Bears, even if we don't see the immediate effects, on the outside, but someone in that organization with that true championship mindset in that position, I think can go a very, very long way. I'm curious with Kevin how long that goes, because he has been someone who, hasn't necessarily stuck around for a super, super long time in a lot of different roles. It's not that he's flaky by any means, but, only Big Ten commissioner for 4 years. It felt like that was a position he might stick into for a long time. He was with the Vikings for quite a while, but it was a lot of different roles and kind of jumped and worked his way up, and, was a COO there, and after he kind of negotiated the sales stuff. So I just wonder, given how the Bears have had Ted Phillips in there for 20 years and have had 4 CEOs in their whole organizational history, I believe, is this something that Kevin Warren will do for 20 years? Or is this something that, they get the stadium built, they get the team having some more success, and is this his long-term, ride it out for the rest of his career type job? Or would he jump at the next big opportunity he might get somewhere else? Just something that's been kind of lingering in the back of my mind here. I do think he's here for at least, the next handful of years, because it sounds like this stadium process is going to be a slow one, and we shouldn't anticipate super fast movement in that regard. We'll hear Kevin's perspective from how that worked in building US Bank Stadium with the Minnesota Vikings, and how you apply that situation to what we're working with here in Chicago, next on Locked On Bears. The Locked On Bears podcast is powered by our friends at Built Bars, the makers of the world's best tasting protein bars ever. It's a delicious treat without all the fat and calories. Built Bars sound like they're too good to be true, but when you taste them, you'll believe them. Because Built Bars taste like candy bars. They're soft, they're easy to chew, they're delicious, they're covered in 100% real chocolate, and they come in a bunch of different delicious flavors. But they're all low sugar, low calories, high fiber, and high protein. We're talking 14 grams of protein and just 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and really, really a great taste to go with it. I haven't found another protein bar product that can taste this good and be this good for you. And now you don't need to wait around to get a box. We've been talking about Built Bars on their website, of course, at built.com, but now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. At Walmart, it's right near the pharmacy section with the protein bars. You can get a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or the coconut puffs. Or if you're close to Sam's Club, you can run in and grab a 13-bar box with all their hit flavors, brownie batter and churro, 2 of the absolute best. And you can get them now in person at Sam's Club. Go check it out. You can thank me later with Built Bars, the world's best tasting protein bars ever. We're going to hear a lot about the Chicago Bears stadium process, and there's going to be a lot of hand-wringing and a lot of, like, anytime there's an update, right, we all kind of want to know, are they going to do it? Are they going to pull the trigger? When is it going to be done? What's the deal here? Are they leaving Soldier Field? Are they not, right? That's everything we want answers to. And even once we start to get some answers, it's still going to be a very long, drawn-out process. And I just have a feeling, not that we're going to get, like, over it, like we're going to be sick and tired of hearing about it, but I do think we're going to hit a saturation point here soon enough where it's just like, okay, just get it done already. We're tired of talking about it and hearing about it. Can we just make a decision, move forward, and get this show on the road so we can either embrace it or, kick and scream about it, but eventually have an answer and a direction here. But after Kevin Warren was through this process with the Minnesota Vikings, I think he has a good perspective on how this might go, and I think the warning we should heed on the very front end is that it's going to require some patience. This is going to take a lot of time. It's a very massive project and operation to go through, and it's not something they're going to rush through. And I also don't know that there is a huge rush to go through with it, with given the length of the lease still remaining on Soldier Field. But I think Kevin Warren himself, while he's not ready to get into too many details, because he hasn't even officially started the job and really been brought in on a lot of this process, I think his perspective on stadium building sets the tone and kind of sets the stage and direction for how this process is going to go from here.
Your experience in getting a stadium built, what did you learn from your time in Minnesota that you think will help the Bears get something done in Arlington Heights, and what's your understanding of the timeline with the purchase there?
A couple things I learned. I remember when we finished the stadium, I have all these boxes of binders, and many people said, you can get rid of those, you'll never use those again. I'm glad I saved them. But I think the biggest thing I learned was the fact that you need to plan before you start digging. And I think what made and makes US Bank Stadium so special, we spent almost a year in planning. And planning is critical, and that's what I appreciate about the McCaskies is they support the planning process. And so I think that will be really critical from that standpoint. I know we're focused on Arlington Park and that stadium development project. I look forward to leaning in to the stadium development project, but I think the biggest thing we can do is to make sure that we're methodical, we're detailed, and we take the time to plan it properly.
Methodical planning, making sure they go through every single detail, that every detail matters. That was a theme in a lot of his other answers in his press conference as well, that he pays a lot of attention to the details, and that in the NFL, so much of the winning is in the margin. It's where can you be 1% better than the opponent? Where can you find one little advantage? Where can you work a little bit harder? Where can you pay a little bit more attention to something? Where can you find the one thing that separates you from the other side? And that, to me, sounds like someone who's not going to just come in and say, Arlington Heights, boom, stadium's coming, and by 2025, we're in. I just don't think that's going to be exactly the process as it goes here. That doesn't mean we're not going to see progress along the way and get updates. Right now we're still waiting for the Bears to officially close on the sale of the Arlington Heights property. That was originally expected perhaps in the fourth quarter of 2022, and now George McCaskey says first quarter of 2023. They seem to be on target for that. They've again reiterated that closing on the sale of the property does not guarantee that they will build the stadium there and completely move forward with that project in that exact way. That is their singular focus at this time, is the Arlington Heights project. That largely seems like an inevitability based on everything we've heard. It's just a matter of what form that looks like, how much it costs, the exact timeline, and what, how they go through that process, getting public funding and that whole ordeal. It's going to take a long time, but it seems like that's everything the organization is investing in, in terms of the time right now and the effort is toward that project. And most other alternatives, staying at Soldier Field or something else, seem unlikely at best at this stage of the process. But that might be years before they even break ground. And then, how long is the construction build there? Another year or two? I mean, that's the kind of timeline we're working on here, right? If you're someone who's never been to Soldier Field and really wants to make sure you get to Soldier Field before the team leaves, I think you got some time here. Don't quote me on it, but certainly I think at least a couple of full seasons at Soldier Field, if not 4 or 5 more full seasons at Soldier Field. It really seems like this is going to be a process that they're just not going to rush into and get super, super accelerated on. Kevin's going to come in, take his time learning the organization, learning the whole process, not even the stadium side, but just like how the Bears run, how Hallis Hall works. He said he wants to meet with every single employee and ask them a series of questions and just kind of get a sense of what they do and how they do it and what they would change and how they would change it if they were in charge. And so then there's getting up to speed on where things stand right now with the Arlington Heights project. And then there's going through the whole process of securing the funding and the architecture and the planning and the groundbreaking and the construction and everything else that goes beyond just the stadium. There's the whole entertainment district outside. It's such a massive logistical process that's going to take a very, very long time. And that's why I say, we might get kind of sick of hearing about this after a little while, where it's just like, okay, we get it. You want to go into Arlington Heights, just get it done and then tell us when you're ready to roll, right? Instead of this, well, we're closing on it, but we're not for sure going into it yet. And then we're going to negotiate here, but we're still not into it yet. And we're going to, there's a lot of process to go here. And I'm definitely going to be as intentional I can on this podcast of not focusing too much on it outside of very real, concrete updates. They had a rendering of, the city of Chicago put out a rendering of Soldier Field, upgrades that they were willing to, to offer in that process. And we talked about it a little bit, but they had a public forum in Arlington Heights a month or two ago that we didn't really talk about here because I just think we're going to keep getting these little crumbs of Arlington Heights field update process stuff, and I'm not going to take each crumb and really dive into it until we get some substantial, meaningful progress that we can actually dive into a little bit and feel like there's something here that will matter to us and will actually have a significant impact on how things happen here moving forward. I do think Kevin Warren can have a significant impact on how things happen here moving forward. It sounds like he's got a good relationship building with Ryan Poles. He went through the whole press conference without saying the word Eberflus. He said coach and Coach Matt, and he said Matt, 6 or 7 or 8 times. My theory is that he doesn't know how to pronounce Eberflus and didn't want to say it incorrectly. But if you go and watch, it's an hour-long press conference. He does not say the word Eberflus a single time. It's coach and Coach Matt, and it put a smile on my face watching him, I think, talk around trying to say Eberflus's last name as to not pronounce it incorrectly. I don't think it was a matter of him forgetting what Eberflus's last name was, but just whether it's Eberflus or Eberflus and not wanting to mess it up in his introductory press conference. It was Coach, and it was Coach Matt, and it was Matt, but it was never Coach Eberflus or Matt Eberflus. So just a fun little game you can play if you end up going and watching that entire Kevin Warren press conference. We're catching up on all the Bears stories we missed while I was gone for this last week. I was in Iceland and France. Had a great trip, got to recharge and refresh a little bit and really get ready to dive in for this offseason. So I hope you'll keep coming back. Keep making Locked On Bears your first listen each and every day. Hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening to the podcast or on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel. That's going to be the best way to make sure you don't miss a thing. We'll be heading down to the Senior Bowl in 2 weeks, get to know some of these college prospects, and see Luke Getsy coaching one of the 2 Senior Bowl squads. We'll hear from him. I'll be at the press conference and try and get a few questions in there as well. So lots of great Senior Bowl NFL draft content coming for you soon. Free agency stuff. We'll still have to look back at this past season, catch up on some things here and there. So keep tuning back in for more. And of course, you got to keep tuning in for your opportunity to bear down.